So we'll start with Shikhar. So Shikhar, professor at business school, seeing a lot of different companies here. What are you seeing out there in general? I'd like to talk through that, and then we'll come to a publicly traded company.
So, John really summarized a lot of what we're seeing out there, which is companies intrigued by the problem, and then trying to find a way to work out what is their strategy relative to this. We've seen this before. We've seen it when the internet first came along. We saw it when mobile came along. And there are certain patterns to it that we get a sense of. I think one question I'd like to ask you is, imagine that you are walking on a beach. And as you walk along, you see this iPad-like thing that's lying there and it's broken. But as you get to it, it gives you a little message and it says, I'm GPT 10.5. And unfortunately, I fell down, but my power supply is gone. GPT 11 is going to have the ability to keep powering itself up. If you pick me up and connect me to your USB, get me the power, I will give you the power with your company to change customer service to 5% of what it costs now, to change marketing, to change your strategy, to change engineering, to dramatically change who you are as a company and how you compete. And the question to you is, would you pick it up, and would you connect it? So think about that for a minute. I did this as a little poll in a conference where we had a little bit more time, and approximately 40% of the people said they wouldn't. And I said why, and they couldn't give me a good reason. But then I asked them, how many of you who would do it would take it to your board and say, this is the most amazing thing ever. We need to get into it. We need to do something with it. And most of them wouldn't. And they said there was this fear. And so the biggest thing that I'm seeing in terms of the restriction of people and the ability for people to embrace this is the same problem we have in almost any new technology, and that is primate behavior. So we're all basically primates, where fear drives what we do. We're concerned about uncertainty. And in that process, AI has all the potential to change things dramatically. It also has the potential to have some spectacular failures. So what do you do about that? How do you move forward with it? And I think there is, a way that I've thought about it is, on one axis, you can say, what is the AI actually doing? And you could say, it's assisting me. It's assisting the person. It's assisting. So that could be summarization of notes. It could be meetings that you work through. It could be code co-pilots. It's often put in the co-pilot kind of category. And there's a bunch of things that you do there. Then there is the notion of augmenting, which is it is doing things that you could never do with any reasonable economics. So imagine language translation, imagine personalization of every message, imagine avatars that come out. These are all technologies that exist today at industrial level abilities. And so there's a bunch of things it could do there. But the final one is transformation. And what it can do is change the business model dramatically. We had Sam Altman in class a couple of years ago, before he got careful about what he said. And there he was pretty open. He said what they see happening and the problem they'd like to deal with is when one company owns the universe. Because if you work through the recursive loops and just work through the math of it, there is very little, because everything we do is cognitive. And so while that's an extreme statement, and he meant it as an extreme statement, it gives you a sense of the direction in which things are going. And so I'm going to just end with sort of three thoughts about where this is all going. One is that most of the time when you have these big technology changes, the first effects are all negative on society, on the company, except for a few people who come out. So the Industrial Revolution is often used as an example on this. What people forget is that when the Industrial Revolution happened, for the first 80 years, 3 generations at that time, the average worker's wages went down. The average standard of living went down quite dramatically. And the institutional structures all supported capital versus labor. So they went in there was something called poor laws. There were other things called masters and servants, where if you worked for a company, they could have you arrested if you didn't show up for work, and so on. And so you have this readjustment of society, but you also have the readjustment within companies that occurs. And so sort of be careful for this jagged move up, move down, move up, move down thing, because people are trying to get their heads around it. I think the second thing is that the way that companies will transform is more likely to be through through termites and not tornadoes. It's not going to come and eat up entire companies at a thing. What's going to happen is small parts of your value proposition will get eaten away. And then it's harder to compete and harder to compete. And at each point, the incremental decision is not going to be worth it, or there's going to be a lot of risk associated with it. In most corporate systems, we don't have a good way to manage risk that you cannot quantify. And so the process will be, but by the time the tornado or by the time the building collapses, it's too late. Because a large part of this process is getting the mindset to work. When we ran an internet company, I remember visiting a retailer who said, oh, Amazon can't compete with us. And I said, why? And they said, because we have a website too. He said, I've been there, people can come in there, they can order all our products, we can ship it within a day. We do all the functions that Amazon does. And what he didn't realize was that Amazon thinks differently. The trajectory on which they're moving is completely different. And so that company is out of business right now. Amazon dominates everything. And it's about the way of thinking. It's about taking learning and moving it through that process. And then I think the final thing I'll just say is that so far, most of the discussion of AI has been around process. How do you take this thing we do and make it better by using AI? The big change I think that's going to come is that it's going to be about people. So, your mother knows you really well because she knew you from childhood. She knows everything you did. She knows the way you react to fear, the way you react to incentives of different sorts. AI is getting there. The context windows from a company called Magic AI now are 100 million tokens. 3 years ago, the largest context window was 3,000. And what that means is that when you have the context window, you know everything about a person, and you can predict what they're going to do, you're going to predict what they're going to think. That, in many ways, has been the holy grail of business. It is, I have this product, how do I know if customers are going to want it? How do I know if I change X in it, it's going to change this about them? And you can know this on a person-by-person basis. And then we're going to move from words to tasks, where agents, the current buzzword, are going to do everything in the process. So these are very radical changes. They're likely to occur over the next 2 to 3 years, not the next 10 years. Then this is all at the cutting edge, and then there's going to be a long group of laggards. And so the way in which you organize the company becomes critical.
So thank you, Shikhar. Shikhar is a professor. He's also a board member in a publicly traded company. Very enthusiastic about this, Melissa. So tell us who WEX is and how have you guys managed your alignment in discussion on AI?
Sure. So WEX is a global B2B fintech company. And our purpose is to simplify the business of running business. We have over 600,000 customers globally. And we're in behind the scenes. We help people get paid and make payments. And we do it in a lot of ways that you probably experience indirectly. If you have an HSA account or an FSA account, we're probably the backbone to that. We sit behind a lot of integrated payments that are happening within travel payments, as well as vehicle-related payments. And really happy to be here. Shikhar's been an amazing board member.
We've talked to a lot of companies, John and I, in the last 12 months, and it's so clear how critical getting alignment at the board is. Lots of discussions, lots of consultants running around, lots of ideas. How did you guys approach that and think about this journey? And we've been very impressed with how much you guys accomplished, but it started somewhere.
Yeah, it did. So just to kind of put this in context, when I first became CEO 11 years ago, every day I would get an article from Shikhar. And the article was about companies failing. And about the 5th day of getting these articles, I called him and I said, okay, there's this lack of confidence. And we spent some time talking about it. And really the message was around complacency kills. And that message has really sat with me for a long time. So I'd like to think of myself as more of a really thoughtful risk taker and wanting to get ahead of these trends. And that kind of played forward in 2022. Shikhar and I and the board have been talking actually quite a bit about AI, but we had a lunch, and at that lunch we sat down And you could see the democratization of AI starting to occur. We were, ahead of the curve. We were using AI before we were talking about ChatGPT becoming a thing. But we really looked at each other, and we both believed that this was something that was really going to be impactful. And we decided to make a big push and to go all in. And what all in meant was making this one of our core strategic points, setting up a few things that we said across the company that were really important. We wanted to make sure we had goals around, you talked about productivity earlier, but really starting with a customer perspective and making sure that what we did had customer impact and that we were going to educate our employees and bring them along this journey. And that was kind of the pivotal point. And we really thought about it as being akin to security. So you think about our technology committee, that's where we spend a lot of time, is information security and AI, because both of those things are foundational to technology companies and really foundational to the success of the company in the future.
And Shikhar, what did you see in that process? Was it a critical meeting, or did you have to get consultants? AV team, the timer's no longer working up here. Was it a collective process? Was it an offsite? Was it articles, the whole management team?
So I think it starts with, at the board level, it starts with board composition. That you need some people in the board who understand what's happening and are willing to go sort of far out. And then you need some other people at the other end who are saying, we need to meet our quarterly numbers, we need ROI, we need all of these things. Reputational risk is a really big issue, all of those sorts of things. But then you need the fabric by which people can actually talk to each other. And what I saw at WEX was this willingness to talk and to be open about what could happen. And also the willingness at the management level to bring outside speakers, outside people in, who would give different perspectives about where things were going. And today, if you go out, you'll find people, Mark Andreessen is the poster person for this, who says this is going to solve every problem in the world immediately. And then you have Yudkowsky and people like that who are saying we'll all die. And so the range of options is as broad as it could possibly be. And you need people to be coming in on this and saying, given that we don't actually know what's going to happen, what is a reasonable approach that we can do during this time so that in that process we don't fall into a trough. I think that just having that trust and that set of different voices becomes really critical. And of course, you need a CEO who is willing to stand behind it and back it, because AI is one initiative, but there are many, many others that companies can have. Consolidation of data platforms, all these things which are big multi-year projects that can be done. And it's got to be put at the top of the list because fundamentally it's about learning.
We'll try to get a few comments in here. We're going to still stay on track, finish up at 9:40. Melissa, tell us a little bit about your personal journey and advice you have for others. I mean, as you know, it takes a long time to get something on agenda for a board.
Yes.
More meetings are planned out. Let's do something in 6 months. Something comes up, well, now we wait another 6 months. I mean, I think probably less than 90% of the companies we deal with have had meaningful multiple board conversations. Did you see this right away? Did you have to go through this process? And what advice do you have for other companies, other CEOs?
Yeah, when we started talking about this, we just made it a regular routine. So it's something, and you're right, board time is critical. And where you spend your time is actually where you end up with your strategy. We'll follow that. And so this is a conversation that's a standing item for us at the board level. And I think the board has encouraged us to do two things. The board's encouraged us to think bigger. So you could actually think about this as an incremental opportunity, which is great. But what they've encouraged us to do is really think what could be the big moving items. And so we have a semblance of both of those activities within the company, things that are going to make life a little bit better, and then some really big ideas that are playing out. And I think that's been really helpful. But when I think about this, there's really been three key things from my perspective. One is put your customer in the center of what you do. AI can do many things, it can't do everything. And so this idea of making sure that you're solving real legitimate problems from a customer perspective is really helpful. And there's a lot of twofers where you're actually solving something that makes it better from a customer, but also costs less and is much more efficient. And those are wonderful examples. So the second thing for us is with your employees in particular, I love to start from the place of possibility instead of the place of fear. And I think that's really important because we can talk to our employees about the fact that we still value the same things, that that customer centricity, how the motion is going to occur is something that's really important to us, but we can do it in a way that takes away a lot of the toil to their day-to-day work. And I think bringing them along that journey has been really important because while we're going through this massive change, our employees are generally going through that journey with a bit of fear that sits behind that. And so we spent a lot of time demystifying what is happening with AI. And then the third thing from my perspective is this idea that you can actually fail along the way. Just get moving. And I think that you can get wrapped up into this idea of AI and get frozen. You can see that, like I see that with my kids sometimes in the field. When they are starting to play and they get intimidated, they don't move. And so we've had a lot of encouragement from the board all the way through the organization to actually test, learn, get out there, get using the tools. And that has created the snowball effect within the company where if you look at our employees now, 3 out of 4 in our surveys are saying they're using AI in their everyday lives. And for us, that's really meaningful because it is starting to create this environment where people feel more confident with the tools and more okay with the opportunities.
That's great. Let's get the microphones. We'll do 1 or 2 questions. Shikhar, what other advice do you have for companies? Obviously, the learning mindset, is it separate for each company? Are there other key advice?
Yeah, I think starting with the notion that we're all primates and that we're mostly driven by fear, especially when you're successful. I think one of the things that I'd advise companies to do is today most of what's discussed is framed in the what could we do? What's the upside by putting this in? What's the risk around it? And I think it's worth having a plan that says, what happens if you don't do this? So what is the cutting edge? So Klarna, for example, has announced that they're cutting their workforce by 50% and increasing their business by 40%, mostly by AI. And they've got a whole set of things. They're getting rid of Workday, they're getting rid of Salesforce. They're building it right through the thing. If you take that as one model, one extreme model, you can then look at other businesses that are doing truly amazing things in your own industry. And you say, how will we compete with this business? And you cannot just put it in. You cannot go in and say, I'm going to buy the AI at this point because now I'm sure, because it's a long process to come through. And so create this plan that says, this is what it could do, but here's what happens if we don't do anything. Here's what the standards for the industry work through. How will we actually do that?
That's great. Let's get 2 questions from the audience. Who's got see one straight head. Who's got our microphones out there? Can we get them out there, runners? And if we get the second question teed up after this one.
Thanks. Hi, Toby Redshaw. So the last survey I saw on how CEOs feel about their CIOs is 72% of them said their CIOs truly suck. I talked to a board member of a very large, storied British company very recently, and she referred to her CIO as a head of wet lettuce. Now, I don't speak British very well, but I'm pretty sure that's not good. So this excitement from a board level, my question is, this excitement and this push to go get GenAI, what if you're one of those companies, those 72% of companies that aren't very good at IT? What do you think differently from a board perspective?
Thanks, Toby. Kick us off strong.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, if I thought my CEO was any of those things, they wouldn't work at WEX. I think that we are in a world that everybody's a technology company, and so you actually have to have that strength. And I think that if that CEO is not doing that from a board level, then that's something that the board actually needs to take action on as well. And then the flip is true. I feel like we are hiring, we have amazing talent. They're here and all over the world because, in part, of our belief of the future and what is capable of. You actually draw a whole new type of talent into the company. But if you don't have the talent you need, you're not going to be able to get the work done.
Just I'd add one thing to it, which is the CIO, the CTO are important, but not the driving force. In this, it really is a business transformation. And so just in the same way as you expect the person in marketing, the person running a particular business, operations, to be financially literate, to understand that the decisions they make about marketing have a financial component to them. You would expect that all of the heads of different operations, different things, are literate on technology. And so they know what a context window is. They know what a model looks like. They know what it can and cannot do. In the same way as they know what the regulations are, what the expectations are for earnings at the end of the quarter. And so that creates a much more healthy, I think, way of looking at the business than depending on the IT group or the CIO to be the only leader pushing the process forward. The IT really is the tail in this process. The dog is the business strategy.
Okay, just to add to that, I'd say that our IT people, the really good ones, are actually thinking about the business benefits. It's the IT outcome is a customer success KPI associated with that. And if you look across our team, I feel like everybody in my team has AI goals. And one of the most meaningful things that I can do is when I use AI myself, I will actually send out output of that to various people in the company, but it creates that spark of interest too around if I'm doing it, then we all can do it, frankly.
John and I see many, many companies, and I'd like to at least highlight this as a best in class. Look what we've seen. We've got a board member, a CEO publicly talking about your strategy. They have a whole table of their management team here. Yeah. You've got thousands of your employees educated here, many, many projects here. So fabulous work, and thank you guys so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shikhar.